I'm Chitaranjan Ray, Director of Nebraska Water Center. I'm the moderator for this session. So some of you probably came from the main plenary session. You recall the last question. Somebody asked from Africa that you see what the similarities between Brazil and Africa. That's a striking question. This is a kind of good transition to where we are going. So the person replied saying that the climatic conditions are similar, but I don't see the similarity in the adoption of technologies. So maybe most of you know the question. The answer is obvious. Why the adoption of technology is not there? Technology doesn't come from the vacuum. Somebody has to invest it, or somebody has to bring it. Unless you are having a commercial agriculture or industrial agriculture, the technology needs to be financed, developed, and all those factors are there. You look at India, 3,000 years, the land fragmentation is going on and on, so the average land size is becoming smaller. So, and every child has the same right to the land, so the further fragmentation goes on. Same thing in Central America also. If you go back to the Mayan civilization or same thing, the small pieces of land, same thing Africa also. So why the unless it is the US West who need to settle with 162, 640 acres per household, or the Brazilian land where you can go and grab and do your land in the farming, it's not possible to bring in technology to such large scales, especially unless the land is so small. So that's basically the limitation, but things are changing. So folks here from Central America or India, now they see even in smallholder landscapes, technology adoption is possible. And there are many things they are doing. This is one of the exciting panels. So I'm going to introduce, we have two sets of talks. The first is from a group, the Catholic Relief Service, that will be basically focusing on the regenerative agriculture, especially in El Salvador. So they have been working on this project for 15 years, and they're probably expecting another 10 years or so working on continuously on this type of things. So the 8 years of experiences they have learned in scaling practices and supporting farmers. So that will be presented by Paul Hicks. He's the interim director of SRL. I think he's going to explain what the exact name of that. Then Adam Kyog, he's the program manager for our ICES. And then two producers, Karen and Paul Penate, they're with actually the NGO Amayeli. So, but they will speak in Spanish, and Adam is going to translate those. So after they are done in 45 minutes or so, then we'll go to Professor Sekhar Muddu. He's coming from India with the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, the professor there. But he has been working with smallholder farmers for almost 2 decades with a lot of external collaborations. How to make, because India, southern India, the peninsular India, it's the only source of food production for them is by irrigation, but surface water irrigation is minimal, so they rely on groundwater. The issue there is that it's all fractured rock, basalt. So, and some of the wells are now 300 to 400 or 500 meters. So how to keep these people in production and make a living? So that's what the focus is going to be, technology adoption and all the ITs. And finally, to make this session possible, I want to recognize an individual here. He's Ned Bloom. Ned is the executive director of Sorghum United. So, and he's doing a lot of interesting things, but I'm going to give him maybe 1 or 2 minutes to say what the organization is all about, and if you can.
Well, thank you. First of all, it's an absolute honor to be here with you. Dougherty Water for Food Global Institution is a MOU partner of Sorghum United Foundation. We're really, really pleased and blessed by that friendship. Also, I just got off a plane last night. I was gone for 8 weeks, so it's great not only to be home, but it's great to have my first day being back here at my alma mater, University of Nebraska. Sorghum United Global Foundation, we work in the food security space, nutrition security, environmental security, but also in the economic prosperity space. So we have field to market trials where we work with local communities, local stakeholders, input providers, governments, to create the systems for a bioeconomy that can not only benefit the food security side, but we can work with communities to create finished and semi-finished products made with sorghum and millets. And why sorghum and millets? Not that we don't like other grains, we certainly do. There's room on the plate for everyone, we like to say. But these grains are highly nutritive. They can address things like stunting around the world, address health issues related to diet, and of course they're very drought tolerant and grow in places where other grains do not. And we also know that by training farmers and farming communities to create a finished or semi-finished product rather than selling a commodity, then they can have more power within the market, they can create jobs within their community, and they can afford to send their children to school. So this is really important work. We're really glad to do it. We have offices literally all over the world, and it is, again, just a pleasure to be with you. And I'm looking forward to hearing from these great companies that are doing wonderful work as well. Thank you.
Ned, thank you very much. And with this, I'm going to ask Paul, you're going to go first? You, Adam. Okay, sure, thank you. I'm going to sit down there. So
Can everyone hear me? Yep, okay, great. My name is Adam Keogh. I work with Catholic Relief Services. We were here 2 years ago at the 2023 Water for Food Conference and had the opportunity to present on our program, Raíces El Salvador. It's a program that's working to promote agricultural landscape restoration in El Salvador. And this year we had the opportunity to come back and talk a little bit about the lessons that we've learned over the past 8 years. We're in our final year of the program. The lessons learned, and specifically on how we've been working to scale the program and the practices that we're promoting in El Salvador, both in the territory we're working and now as we grow more and more across the country and the region. So a little bit of context. Raíces means roots in Spanish. And the objective of our program is to build resilience and improve farmer livelihoods. By promoting low-cost soil restoration practices. And we do this through developing a network of extensionists, both directly related to our program and also through government agencies. So it's like a multi-actor network that we work with to promote and expand practices in restoration and conservation agriculture. During this presentation, there's so much we can talk about in our program, the practices, the way we do things, but we're really going to kind of focus on the way that we've been working to scale practices across the territory that we work in, how we're working with different farmers, and how a couple institutions can work with a very large number of individual farmers. I'd like to point out that the Raíces program is implemented by Catholic Relief Services with funding from the Howard G. Buffett Foundation. We started in 2018, and we're in our final project year. We'll be closing the project out in 2025, but we have some exciting things coming up to continue our work in the area. Just a little bit of context about where we're working. So this is Western El Salvador. This is a similar slide that we showed 2 years ago, but the numbers have changed. We're now working with over 5,000 farmers across the Western Territory of El Salvador. We're reaching over 5,600 hectares, roughly nearly 14,000 acres. And we do this through a network of different NGOs and service providers in the area. So we work with Caritas El Salvador, Tierra Saludable Amayale, which you'll hear a lot in this presentation. Also, we'll refer to it as TSA. It's the partner that's here with us today. Raindrop, Renacer, and Comar, and CRS. And I think that the last time we presented, we were around 3,000. So over the past 2 years, we've grown quite a bit. During today's presentation, we're going to focus in on TSA, Tierra Saludable Amayale, and how they, as a local partner of the program, have really expanded our reach to local farmers across the territory. So just to give a little bit of context about our extension model and how we're trying to reach this amount of farmers is really we focus our model in co-learning. It's not a prescriptive model of, we have a set of practices. The model focuses specifically on the problems that farmers face. What are the critical problems they face? And then working with our specialists, our technicians, our extensionists directly on the farm to provide hands-on solutions, trials through our extensionists, working directly with local promoters. These are community-based promoters. We'll talk a little bit more about this with TSA. On the farmer's farm, looking at the problems they're facing and applying and trying and adapting low-cost solutions to improve soil health, to improve productivity, and to lower costs. There's a lot on this slide. I'm not going to go into all the details of it, but we can definitely share this information, and I hope that more of this will come out as we talk through the specific examples. This is kind of a conceptual model of the extension model, and I just wanted to show this to focus in on how this is set up as like a horizontal approach, not a top-down prescriptive approach to extension. We work with multiple specialists that have their extensionists working with the field staff who are then going out. It's a horizontal approach, going out and working with these community leaders, promoters, to create a network of clusters of farmers all adopting and adapting these practices to their context in the area that they're in. To get into a little bit more detail, I'm going to introduce my colleagues from TSA. I'm going to start with Karen Piñate. We're going to talk a little bit more about the specifics of what they do as a service provider, as a partner of Raíces in the field, as one of the specialists that are out promoting, supporting the adoption of these practices to promote conservation and regenerative agriculture. So, adelante, Karen. And I'm going to be translating in real time. I'm going to do my best. I will definitely make mistakes.
Bueno, tengan buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Karen Peñate.
Good afternoon. My name's Karen Piñate.
Hoy les voy a hablar un poco sobre Tierra Saludable Ameyali.
So today I'm going to talk a little bit about Tierra Saludable Ameyali, TSA, from now on.
Bueno, Tierra Saludable Ameyali es una empresa pionera en El Salvador
So TSA is a pioneering social enterprise in El Salvador
en agricultura de conservación.
in conservation agriculture.
Sus principios principales son asistencia técnica,
Our primary focus is to provide technical assistance
formación y agricultura de conservación mecanizada.
and training in conservation agriculture.
Bueno, todo esto inició cuando la familia
The way that we started was as a family.
inició formándose en temas de agricultura de conservación o agricultura regenerativa.
We started applying and we were participating in several training opportunities around 2005. There was opportunities to receive trainings on regenerative and conservation agriculture. And as a family, we started to receive these trainings and apply them on our farms.
Luego, formando parte del programa Raíces El Salvador,
When the Raíces program started in the territory in 2018, we joined on some of the initial trainings as well, and we became part of the project.
regresamos a formar a más familias en estos temas de agricultura regenerativa.
And it was at this time that it gave us the opportunity to take what we had learned prior to the project and also what we were learning in the early years and provide training and outreach to neighboring farmers in our area.
Formando a 5 promotores para el año 2019.
So in 2019, we, based on the training that we had and the experience prior, we started training, working with 5 neighboring farmer families in our area.
Formándolos en temas claves de agricultura regenerativa, incrementamos para el año 2024 a 1,300 familias.
And over the years, we've continued this outreach through the extension model that we discussed earlier, identifying local leaders and promoters to build up our network. And over the years, we're now reaching, in 2024, 1,300 farmer families in our area.
Teniendo 966 hectáreas,
And this represents about 966 hectares, or 2,386 acres,
con prácticas de agricultura.
who are now applying regenerative and conservation agriculture practices.
Tierra Saludable Mediali trabaja con 7 extensionistas
So the way that we do this is we have 7 field extensionists
formando a 100 promotores
that provide direct training to 100 community-based promoters
que son formados en una escuela de campo
that are trained in a farmer field school approach.
en temas como manejo de suelos,
And they're trained in residue management,
asocio de cultivos de cobertura,
intercropping cover crops. And it's in these, so residue management, intercropping cover crops, soil fertility management, among others. I'm sorry, I'm adding a little bit for Karen as well. Among others, and it's through these farmer field schools and these community-based promoters that we're able to reach that 1,300 farmers.
Igualmente proporcionamos capacitación a más de 150 jóvenes
In addition to the farmer field school approach, we're also working directly with local youth. We're working with over 150 local young people
a través de una alianza con el Bachillerato Agropecuario,
through a partnership with local agricultural technical high schools in the area.
formándolos en temas como maquinaria, ganadería,
We focus the training with the youth in mechanization, livestock,
y diferentes cultivos de cobertura que pueden ser en asocio.
and different cover crops that could be applied in intercropping in that territory.
Bueno, como TSA, también trabajamos en el componente de agricultura mecanizada, quien va a ser mi hermano Carlos, les va a hablar un poco sobre el tema.
One of the key components of the work that we do in TSA is introducing mechanized conservation agriculture. And I'm going to have my brother Carlos talk a little bit more about our focus on incorporating mechanization in conservation agriculture. Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Peñate.
Soy estudiante de agronomía
I'm an agronomist student,
y formo parte del equipo técnico del Centro de Formación
and I work as part of the technical team at TSA
en el área de agricultura de conservación mecanizada.
in our services for mechanized agricultural services.
En la parte de agricultura mecanizada es algo nuevo en el país.
Mechanized conservation agriculture is actually very new in our country.
Siendo la primera empresa en poner esto en práctica.
We're the first business to provide these services.
Empezamos en el 2019
We started testing and applying mechanization in our farm in 2019.
con un pequeño auto y un rodacamador hecho de madera.
We started by using a small Jeep, a Suzuki Samurai, and a wooden log as a roller crimper.
Para el año 2021 se adquirió maquinaria ya para el área.
In 2021, we were able to acquire our first more professional equipment.
Siendo un tractor,
We required a 100 horsepower tractor,
una sembradora,
a no-till planter,
un rodacamador y una chapoadora.
a roller crimper, and a mower.
Con este equipo empezamos a establecer parcelas vitrinas en el centro.
With this equipment in our family farm and training center, we set up demonstration farms applying the different field preparation practices
Para que productores y agricultores de la zona conocieran de estas nuevas tecnologías.
so neighboring farm families could see how we were applying it on our own farm.
impulsando así 3 servicios en el área,
So we started providing 3 services in our area,
que es manejo de residuos,
which are residue management,
siembra directa
no-till planting,
y preparación del campo.
and field preparation.
Eso, la agricultura de conservación mecanizada ayuda principalmente a 3 puntos claves.
So we've seen 3 benefits of applying these practices through mechanized equipment.
Siendo uno es reducción de costos,
We've seen reduction in costs,
reducción de la erosión en el suelo
reduced erosion, soil erosion,
y optimizando el uso de insumos.
and improved efficiency in farm inputs.
Para el año 2024
In 2024,
cerramos aproximadamente con 600 acres de agricultura de conservación mecanizada.
we provide services on about just roughly 600 acres provided for cost services to neighboring farmers.
Para el 2025 esperamos tener más de 800 acres con agricultura de conservación mecanizada.
In 2025, we hope to reach over 800 acres through these services.
Implementando un nuevo equipo que es tractor John Deere y sembrador John Deere.
Yeah, in this coming year, we'll be deploying a second tractor and a second planter.
La maquinaria esta tuvimos capacitación de un alumno de la Universidad de Nebraska.
Yeah. And last year, we received a second tractor, a little bit larger than the first. It was a donation through the Howard G. Buffett Foundation. And because it was a more sophisticated tractor, we actually reached out to a student here at the University of Nebraska, Trevin Schneider. Last name's pretty hard. Trevin, who's a student here who came to El Salvador. You can see him, the red shirt, representing Nebraska in El Salvador, providing us support on the new equipment.
Para ayudarnos a entender esta nueva maquinaria.
Yeah, so he helped us a lot last year, and we actually just spent a week with him here in Nebraska doing a follow-up on that training.
Un ejemplo inspirador para nosotros es el agricultor Jorge Casún,
So an inspiring example of the benefits that we see that farmers are seeing through these services is that of Jorge Casun,
que ha logrado aumentar su producción y reducir sus costos gracias a la agricultura de conservación mecanizada.
who's been able to increase his yield and reduce his cost over a 3-year period working with us on these services.
Manejando distintas prácticas de conservación,
By applying these conservation practices,
ha logrado reducir sus costos y brindarle luz a estudios universitarios a uno de sus hijos.
Jorge has been able to reduce his cost and increase his overall farm profitability to the point where he's able to send his son to university.
La mecanización no solo facilita el trabajo en campo,
The mechanization doesn't only help to increase our efficiency in the field,
sino que hace que las prácticas sostenibles sean más accesibles para nuestros productores.
they also make the conservation practices more accessible to more farmers in our area.
Mirando hacia un futuro, nos proyectamos a alcanzar muchas más familias para ayudarles con agricultura de conservación mecanizada.
So looking to the future, we hope to continue to expand our services. The demand is increasing, and we hope to continue to provide more services, more farmers these services to increase their yields and reduce their costs.
Y poder aumentar su productividad y reducir sus costos para que tengan una mejor vida y un mejor desarrollo.
Yeah, to be able to increase their livelihoods, increase their quality of life, and the sustainability of their farms.
Y nos pueden encontrar en Instagram como Tierra Amayali SB.
If you'd like to see more about the work that we're doing, you can follow us on Instagram, Amayale SV.
Y con el correo
You could also reach out to us directly through our email,
es así.
Tierra Saludable Amayale. And that's it for us. Thank you very much. Goes back to me, and then I go to you. So I'm going to start wrapping up the portion on the Raices program. So this is just a quick slide that shows the expansion of the program since the beginning. So at the end of 2018, we were working with one partner organization similar to that of TSA. We were working with 10 extensionists, 53 promoters, and reaching 780 hectares. By early 2025, this year, we're working with 3 partner organizations, including TSA, 51 extensionists in the field, and we have 342 farm promoters reaching over 5,000 producers. And this is helping us to apply regenerative agriculture on 5,600 hectares. So thank you very much. And then, so what I want to say before I pass it to Paul is based on the learning and the scaling of this project, we've been able to continue to scale, and Paul's going to talk a little bit more about how we're continuing to grow this across El Salvador and hopefully more regionally.
We can't hear ourselves, but you can hear in the back? Great. I started working with this team when we got off the ground, and then in addition to applying regenerative agriculture in this territory, we had a goal to scale to a larger scale and influence how agriculture is being practiced in the country. And what I'm going to introduce over the next several slides is a program called the Rio Lempa Conservation and Restoration Program, which is a 20-year, $200 million program. And what it's doing is taking the experiences, the practices, the results that we have from this 8-year program, which was funded by the Howard G. Buffett Foundation, and then move that into the largest and most important watershed in El Salvador. So the Rio Lempa is a 1 million hectare watershed transboundary. It shares borders with Honduras and Guatemala. And it accounts for 2/3 of the water resources in El Salvador and provides water to 3/4 of the population. It's also a major source of agricultural production and food for the country. Corn and beans are the staples and grown across the watershed. Coffee in the highlands and sugarcane as an export cash crop is also a major crop within the watershed. So the funding for this 20-year, $200 million program is innovation in financing that has taken off over the last 10 to 15 years. What it is it's referred to as a debt conversion. And kind of in simple terms, what it was a refinancing of the sovereign bond debt of El Salvador through a $1 billion loan from JP Morgan, which was made possible through private risk insurance issued by the Development Finance Corporation, which is an entity housed within the U.S. Treasury Department. So this private risk insurance made it possible for JP Morgan to provide this loan, which enabled the Salvadoran government to refinance its debt, and in the process generated savings of over $350 million. And so that savings, virtually all of that savings, is going into this long-term program. It's 20 years, $200 million to execute the Conservation Restoration Program. And then the other $150 million is funding an offshore endowment, which will create an evergreen trust to continue funding conservation restoration work in the same watershed from 2044 and beyond. So it's the government of El Salvador that's paying for this program over the next 20 years through this financing mechanism. And then the Development Bank of Latin America, CAF, is also providing a type of risk insurance to complement the role of DFC. CRS, Catholic Relief Services, is the technical director for the program. And then the Environmental Fund of El Salvador, FIAS, is our partner on the ground. And we're working very closely with key government agencies, including the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Environment, and the National Water Authority. The mechanism of this is fascinating, interesting. It's been a steep learning curve for us on getting to where we are on this. We've learned a lot, and the pioneers in a lot of this work is the Nature Conservancy, and they've got some great resources on how these debt for nature conversions come together. The one on the right is just a diagram of how a debt for nature swap came together in Gabon for coastal protection. And most of the debt for nature programs historically have been about marine protection. What's unique about the Rio Limpa program in El Salvador is that it's based on a watershed. And since this one came together, there's been another similar program funded through a debt conversion in Ecuador. So the program, lots here on this slide, but the top of it is the most critical piece. The Rio Limpa Conservation Restoration Program has two kind of intertwining goals. The first one is restore ecosystem services with an emphasis on improving water availability, water quality, and biodiversity. And the second is to foster social and economic development with an emphasis on resilient livelihoods and rural communities. There are a series of types of interventions as an integrated watershed program. The one that we're going to focus on for the rest of the presentation is promoting regenerative agriculture, essentially building on the lessons and the experiences that we had with the Raíces program. I want to just give a kind of a historical context on how we came to be emphasizing regenerative agriculture as a strategy for watershed conservation and restoration. So in 2012, I was here at one of these first conferences at the Institute. And at that point, we were developing a small-scale irrigation program for Central America. But the topic of the conference here was blue water, green water, and the future of agriculture. And in it, Malin Falkenmark, a brilliant researcher from Sweden, was making the case that we really need to be putting more emphasis on green water and sustainable soil management before we jumped into irrigation. We were over-relying on irrigation and needed to be being much more efficient about how we're using rain-fed systems in crop production and resilience. And that presentation and then subsequent conversations with Malin and others led us to actually just do a 90-degree turn and take this long-term program that we're developing, which evolved into Raíces, and have it focus on soil restoration and rain-fed agriculture. Around that same time, the Nature Conservancy came out with a study called the Blue Water Footprint. And they looked at 500 cities around the world and kind of did a comparative cost-benefit analysis of what was the most effective and efficient ways to protect and restore drinking water in these cities. And their conclusion was that promoting regenerative agriculture was the most cost-effective way to be restoring water for the future. And we took that and said, well, regenerative agriculture is good watershed management when it's done well. And in the case of the Rio Limpa, 45% of the watershed is dominated by agriculture. So our interventions are required to look at how we take agriculture as part of the solution. So as we were getting these programs off the ground, we came to know Jenny Barron, who's in the audience here. And Jenny had written an article that was titled Manage Soils to Manage Water. And that just became our motto in the way that we have been developing these programs over the last decade. The Raíces program is why it's called Roots, is looking at how are we focusing on those roots. So we worked with a number of researchers over the years where we're documenting and defining what are those key regenerative practices that increase water recharge, reduce erosion and runoff, and reduce contamination. So what we have documented in research and what we presented on 2 years ago at this conference is that the three key practices that we focus with smallholder farmers and now larger farmers as well is keeping soils covered with cover crops and crop residues, plant live barriers along contours and fence lines, and use inputs efficiently The phrase we use is know your soil. We apply a 4R soil fertility management approach, and a key activity that we do is managing pH, as where we are, soil acidity tends to be a problem and affects soil fertility. I won't get into this slide, but basically it's looking at a combination of different regenerative agriculture practices at a watershed scale and how those are affecting water availability, water quality, water recharge, reducing erosion, contamination, and generally making water more available for multiple purposes. So when we look at those practices, it's exactly what TSA was demonstrating here, promoting regenerative agriculture at scale. In the highlands, we're working in mainly coffee agroforestry systems, so a combination of practices on sloping lands. This is where the headwaters of the rivers, in particular the Rio Lempa watershed in El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, dominated by coffee agroforestry systems. So we've been researching, testing, implementing, and scaling up key practices to improve water recharge and reduce erosion in the headwaters of the river. Most, or 30% of the watershed is impacted by grazing, and in many cases not very sustainable grazing practices, overgrazing, and exposing soils to a lot of erosion from rain and wind. So expanding regenerative pasture management becomes key, and one of our biggest challenges is, and what we need to be putting a lot more effort into in El Salvador and throughout Central America. And finally, and as kind of a segue, in Professor Shaker's presentation, is co-investing in efficient irrigation in small scale, at small scale and large scale. The program itself, $200 million, sounds like a lot, spread over 1 million hectares, over 20 years is not so much money. So the kind of the DNA of the funding strategy is to be able to leverage and invite in the types of investments that we need from development banks, private sector, and others to be scaling up, in this case, efficient irrigation. There's very little irrigation in El Salvador. Earlier this morning, Clay Pope, I believe is his name, from Oklahoma, from TNC, gave us I thought a fantastic summary of the challenges they have in Oklahoma, which what he was calling the flash droughts. And that is a great way of describing the impacts of climate change in Central America, where virtually all the agriculture systems are rain-fed. And what we're seeing is more and more is the need for supplemental irrigation to be able to mitigate the risks related to these short dry periods during the rainy seasons that can have devastating impacts on productivity and in the dry years, driving farmers into debt. So this is the role of looking at how we invest in supplemental irrigation for crop productivity. And from what we've heard so far, we have a good professor here to teach us how to do that.
Thank you, thank you. I'll go there probably, too easy for my presentation. Am I audible? Yeah. So first, I'm Shekhar Mudhu from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. I'm a professor, not so much in directly handling, but I've been involved with the small farmers by way of monitoring, understanding, analysis. So first, let me thank DWFI for inviting me, Chittaranjan and others for having me here. And I'll quickly go through some of my presentations. So do I see my slides? Yeah. So I called it as you can see the title, I just thought, okay, India as a laboratory for innovation. Some of you have been coming back from India. So how do we look at smart management of water and for agriculture? And what are the challenges, rather? So you'll quickly see, or maybe if you see in the back of the slide, I don't know if it goes back. No, okay. So you can see smallholders, you can see a large number of various types of farms over there. Some of them sunflower, some of them turmeric. So each farmer is growing something. So in typically in 1 square kilometer in southern India, you have about 30, 40 type of crops. So they are not the same. So that's how we call in India a thali, right? Lots of food where we can use this. So several years ago, we're talking about decades back, it's essentially rain-fed agriculture. We had a lot of millets, pulses. Tim was here from sorghum, right? So we have a lot of millets and pulses, but low yield. This continues in many farms where you have rain-fed agriculture. A few occasional irrigation from dug wells, you can see short wells. And then maybe a small tank systems, which are also prevalent at that time. Slowly, we had the Green Revolution in the 60s, and we started building up the canals, the dams, and so on and so forth, and then the paddy and the wheat, the rice and the wheat, which has occupied a large part of the systems. And then came the second part of the Green Revolution. I'm just giving a summary so that you get an idea of what happened in India over the years. So in 1980s, we invested a lot in subsurface use of water, the groundwater. So we call this as a pump revolution. I don't call it. There are several others who call this as Molly and others. So this happened where a smallholder like that would use a small tank, which you can see in the background, where they pump the water and put it into a polythene line into a pond, and then store it, and then connect it either through a small pump for drip irrigation or a sprinkler or an overland flow as simple gravity. So this opportunity gave up, we call it as a minor irrigation in India. You have something called a major irrigation and a minor irrigation. Today, the minor irrigation is probably 75% of the total irrigation. That means the canal irrigation, the dams which we built, is only a 30%. Maybe 70% is minor irrigation. In India, where 50% is rain-fed and 50% is irrigation today. So this has helped immensely the many farmers to access the water and change it into, to buffer droughts, and also to be able to increase the productivity, and also to be able to go into other crops which were not feasible with rain-fed. So it also helped for increasing the milk revolution. So we have abundance of milk. We produce the highest milk in the world. And then we have also oil seeds. I just gave an example of sunflower, which is the other part of it. So why this was needed? Maybe you see the cartoon on the back. So you can see that Indian monsoon undergoes a lot of changes. We have a summer monsoon, which is the rain, and it is not, even though it varies year to year on, but there are decadal variations. So you can see several tenths of years you have high rainfall, again a few rainfall. So in the last sector, probably if you're looking at somewhere around from 1990s onwards, 1980s, we had always a lower rainfall than in the previous edition, and so on and so forth. So the need for using the irrigation came from, the kick came from that last part where you see the lower rainfall patterns in the last 20, 30 years. So, but then if you go back and see, so you see on the other cartoon, which you can see probably, and the productivity is going on, increasing. All crops are growing on irrespective of the reduced rainfall period. So if you look at a map of India and see how is my surface and groundwater irrigation is doing, the blue parts are the surface water and the red parts are the groundwater. So the blue parts are the places where you have dams, you have in the valleys, where you can have the left bank and right bank canals, like the irrigation, whereas the groundwater has been able to uniformly go around into the upper relief areas, upper hills, and so on and so forth due to the, so you can see the major irrigation is a much smaller fraction of the minor irrigation in comparison. And the major irrigation is essentially done by the government, building the dams. Minor irrigation is individuals putting the wells and the infrastructure. So there is a huge risk for an individual if the water doesn't come out of the well. So if you look at on a global scale, the groundwater use in India is by far the highest in comparison to other countries. So you can see the dots there. US is probably at somewhere around orange dots, reaching a plateau somewhere around 100 plus kilometer cube, whereas China is also around that. And if you see, total India is about 250 plus. So if you combine all the groundwater of the many major countries, and India is one half and the other one is other half. This is also posing a lot of sustainability issues on groundwater, which we have been discussing today in the morning. So if you see one state and southern part of India, the growth of the economy, the gross value output, I tried to put it in US dollars so that it makes sense. So I was asking one of the government, what's the amount of groundwater output from the agriculture versus the surface. The blue one is the surface water. As you can see, it's kind of remained flat over the last 10 plus years. And then if you see the groundwater growth, it's going. So there is a lot of aspiring farmers who wants to use the groundwater irrigation and produce more and more. So what are the challenges? You'll see very soon the challenges and what government is trying to do. So we know that groundwater is getting lost. Many places groundwater is more than 100 meters deep. In some places, for example, in my home, it's about 250 meters is my groundwater level in Bangalore. And so we have wells which are 500 meters deep. Some places could be 300 meters. So sustainability of groundwater is a key issue. That means that is a challenge. So what states are doing? Knowing that there is a lot of public investment on groundwater by the farmers, the watershed treatments are going on. IWRM is on. For example, this is an example of Department of Land Resources of Government of India looking at how to treat the watersheds for conserving soil moisture and groundwater recharge. So also looking at soil erosion in India. Over the years of agriculture, the soil organic carbon is less than 1%. So that means, unlike probably here, you have 4, 3, 5%. So we're talking about very small organic carbon, and that's also getting lost. So we don't want any soil erosion. We want to conserve soil water, soil moisture, and also ensure that the groundwater is preserved. So there are a lot of practices in terms of ensuring that the water is stuck as much as possible in the uplands, in the surfaces by putting trenches, tanks, check dams, et cetera, which are all the conservation practices. The emphasis is also on the national emphasis on watershed development plan is on looking at sustainability of water, ensuring that they have mitigate the climate risks, and also looking at agriculture, which has improving the water productivity and decarbonization. So more and more states are looking for reduced emissions from agriculture, or maybe this will benefit in various ways the system. So looking at how to manage the watersheds is one of the major goals, and which is helping overall improving the sustainability of the farming system. So a typical micro watershed in southern India would look like this. And so one of the first steps what they are doing is looking at soil mapping. They call it as soil mapping, giving a soil health card to every farmer. A small farmer will have a health card about telling various properties. So some states have gone further and looking at something called a land resource inventory card. So you see a list of parameters which are given to a farmer, a small farmer of 1 hectare. These data would be given. They will also give information on what to grow, what crop choice would be ideal for that particular, especially if it is a rain-fed agriculture under that climate. And then if there is an irrigation, probably the farmer has a much better opportunity to have more choice of crops because water is the key. So in India, the limiting factor is water. There is no problem of sunlight. Throughout the year, you have enough abundant sunlight. The main problem is the water. So looking at the fertility parameters and other parameters become critical. So if you look at a small micro watershed of something like about 500 hectares, 5 square kilometers, you make a maps of this kind, which is provided to the local unit, local village unit, to be able to say each of these farmers have what kind of crops, what kind of texture, what kind of soil matrix is involved, which is a critical. I think today morning we were discussing about what kind of soil we have, what is the water availability. So this is the first step, because once you know the soil, you know the thickness of the soil, you know how much water you can conserve in the system, you know how to use, you made a point in the saying that we should know our soils first before we, so this is the one step where the soils are getting mapped. So digital soil mapping is a program which is going on. Parallelly, at the higher level, in order to understand water and the water cycle, we have the national program which is going on, where we are building a lot of satellites. So you know, some of you are familiar with, we're just waiting for the NISAR to be launched, which should go off probably in the month of May, which is a NASA ISRO SAR satellite, which will give a global soil moisture across the globe every week plus. At about 10-meter resolution. So that means if you have a farm of 1 hectare, you get a very good soil moisture map. This is a global map which will be produced by NASA ISRO. ISRO is Indian Space Research Organization. So we have a very heavy satellite which will go up, which could not happen with SMAP mission. So this will add to the SMAP mission. Then we have invested in a future satellite which will come up, which is a part of a cascade of satellites which NASA will also launch, which is for evapotranspiration. So this is called Trishna, which is going to get evapotranspiration every 3 days at the scale of 1 hectare globally. So all land, all over the globe, you'll get this. After Trishna in 2030, NASA would launch something called LSTM. So that will also continue. So you'll have concurrent satellites for evapotranspiration. That means what I'm trying to say is that there is a global push for getting remote sense products for soil moisture and evapotranspiration, to do the crop water budgeting, to look at more agilient and tactical way of managing water, and India has invested into it. So typically, I'm just giving an example of many World Bank projects which are going on as a pilots in India and in Karnataka state where I come from. So what are they trying to do? For example, the pilot project with the World Bank in Karnataka is looking at something like 2 million hectare land, where the idea is to produce large amount of data inventory. The data inventory is looking at producing hydrology atlas, decision support diagnostics, so that the treatment methods can be properly effective. So when we look at the hydrological information, they look at all the hydrology data to be generated, the soil data to be generated, the practices generated, and so that you can have a series of decision support diagnostic, whether like water balance, what is the runoff index, what is the groundwater index, what is the evapotranspiration index, what is the soil erosion index. So these kind of things are generated for a small micro watershed of 500 hectares over a 2 million hectares. So these kind of plans are being generated in several states, so that you can create a digital inventory. We have at the national scale called digital stack, which will help the converting this digital information into various private players, so that private players, SMEs, can access this data and use this example. So parallelly, one can build models on it. I'll show you how small pilot watersheds are created, so that you can have lots of instrumentation, and which can be put in a state of Karnataka. We have several such instrumentations, putting flux towers, Bowen towers, soil moisture stations, so that you have well-calibrated data sets. So that's the research part of it, which is important for doing various investments. So you have people measuring through LICAR. You see upstairs LICAR. So you have the LICAR for looking at how are the crops doing, and so on and so forth. Groundwater monitoring, and so on and so forth. So that you have a proper water budget at a small holder micro watershed scale, which is a critical. So for example, by doing this exercise, one can see the lower part of the cartoon. You can see what amount of evapotranspiration is happening in the summer season. The green portion in the window is telling you about the rainy season. the amount of evapotranspiration in the second season, so that you know what is my total water budget and how much is evapotranspiring and where should I invest. For example, if you see the precipitation, there is no precipitation during the January, during April period. That's not the rainy season. But evapotranspiration is happening because people are using groundwater, people are pumping the water during that season. So you know that you have to store the water for that season for both horticulture and agriculture crops. So can do a groundwater management knowing the evapotranspiration properly over a year. So this is a critical requirement. So if you look at small micro watershed like that, you can see the parts of areas where you have the greener parts will tell you that's a plantation. So a lot of plantations are there where there is a fruits and so on. They require water throughout the year. And so you need to have a proper water balance for the plantations, the horticulture, as well as the crops which are on the land. So quickly going into just giving an example of how we build the groundwater status, the groundwater mapping for the micro watershed, a small watershed, the groundwater levels are mapped through various approaches, going to the field, doing various auxiliary methods and so on, looking at the groundwater levels and getting the recharge assessments, and also looking at sustainability of the watershed. So each watershed is assessed in a sustainably. I don't want to go into too much of tech in this, but then this is where it is done for each watershed, so that is a consortium of partners like me coming in, working with them to generate some maps so that we know which watershed is in red. For example, watersheds which are above the boundary of the orange line means they are using more water than sustainably. So that way we know what to do in those watersheds. Should we cut back on the water use? What is the methodology we should do? So this helps the government agencies to isolate each micro watershed of 500 hectares and say what's going on, what is the pathology of the problem, and how do we do some kind of an implementation of activity, getting a soil moisture map of that region, of understanding in the last 10 years how is the soil moisture doing in that micro watershed, what's the main problem, and so on and so forth. And also looking at DSS tools, an example of this, what kind of a water stress we're talking about, if we change the cycle of crop, what would happen to the crop, etc. So these are, I call them as the DSS tools which would help the assets which are created in the form of infrastructure of wells, infrastructure of the tools to provide the soft knowledge. And this is where the SMEs are looking at, all the tech companies are looking at, because they can easily add these value added products, and these value added products would help to save choice of crop, type of agriculture, and so on and so forth. So just to give an idea, so for example, if you look at a groundwater level in a hard rock formation where I come from, the blue line would tell you that the groundwater level operates with rainfall, sometimes lower and higher because you're not using it. But then if you're using a groundwater for use in some of these, so you'll see the orange one where the groundwater level is continuously going down. But it's not going down monotonously like in Punjab or in the northern part where the alluvium is. But here, the groundwater is going down because of the hard rocks. There is no more amount of water available, so the yields come down. So groundwater acts as a limiting variable, or the aquifer acts as a limiting variable for extraction, because, for example, maybe on the next side you see the yield declines. As the groundwater level goes down, yields decline. So that means people who want to pump cannot pump anymore. So it's like aquifer is acting as a conservator. So now, because of that, again, water level will come up when there is a good rainfall. But the problem is in these areas where the water tables go down, when the yields go down, you don't have enough yield for the farmer to irrigate and so on, noted. So one of the critical needs is how do we manage groundwater on the both supply side and the demand side. Supply side is we just saw how the investments are. Demand side is how to help a farmer to manage his water year on year, season to season, based on the ET requirements, the amount of water available, choice of crop, etc. So one of such example is, for example, I'll show you very quickly to say that if you had a low rainfall year, my groundwater level goes down. The red dot tells you my groundwater level is going down. So again, after a good rainfall, my groundwater level comes up. But then the soil moisture would be also dependent on how the groundwater level. Because groundwater level goes down, my yield goes down, my soil moisture is low in that season. So the farmer who has invested with a groundwater wouldn't have get enough yield. He could have buffered a lack of rain in the last year when there was no rain, but the next year he could not have because there was low, even though he had a groundwater availability which was poor, so soil moisture was not there. So the important message I want to tell is that the access of well is not important, the pump is not important, but the aquifer is not providing. So we need to have a decision support tool to tell the farmer what to irrigate, when to irrigate, and how sustainably use the well. So for example, we were building a tool to be able to give the farmer an idea saying that how do I manage the demand based on the available water beginning of the season. For example, if the farmer is starting in May to August a crop, we need to know what is the groundwater yield available for 1 hectare farm. So this year groundwater yield is very low. We're going to tell the farmer, maybe you need to hedge only 20% irrigation in the farm. Maybe the rest of the 80% or 70% maybe use a rain-fed agriculture. Next year when I have a good yield, I'll say, okay, go ahead with 80% agriculture irrigation in the farm. So the choice of crop would depend upon the amount of water available. So this is important because many farmers found themselves not able to manage the volatility of this groundwater behavior. So this I will call as challenge. So in order to invest into this, again, to advisories and so on, the government has invested into advisories. So they have something called a 24 hours, 365 days advisory systems in different states. So Karnataka has a 365, so there is a team of people. When a farmer calls, immediately provide the information of what to be done, etc. So we have an advisories available and interactive facilities, a help desk, so that the farmers can call. And they also invested in a lot of information to be provided, both agriculture as well as meteorology and also from the groundwater and so on. So a lot of bulletins, advisories are provided. And for example, I asked a small tech company to tell me what kind of they are doing. So they have something called an app. Maybe you can also check. The farm is called Sat to Farm. He was my old farmer PhD student. So he's working in about 30 countries, providing this technology in Africa and several other countries. So Sat to Farm is a farm. So they provide lots of satellite-based soil health information and PK, pH, SOC, how to irrigate, satellite-based soil moisture, and so on and so forth, NDVI information. So you can look at Satyukt Analytics is the company. So they provide a lot of information. They are Bangalore-based. So this kind of small SMEs and tech companies are many, and there is an aspiring interest to provide. So what are we doing? The back end, there's a big layer built by the government which can be accessed by them and provide solutions locally. And so they can provide information on soil organic carbon in a small plot, pH, nitrogen, and so on. And then the farmers are able to use through the apps to decide on when to irrigate, when not to irrigate, and how to efficiently use the water. So water use efficiency and water productivity gets important. And many farmers switched from using furrow irrigation to drips and sprinklers because they found that the water is important. So they are very much cautious. They are very familiar with the problem of the access of water from the wells. So what some of us are doing is to help these, providing the distance support tools. For example, we have a distance support tool to look at like this, to produce information on crop models, combining with groundwater models, socioeconomic models, farmer decision models. We call it as a model called Namaste, and a series of models we produce, which go into as an advisory tools, which the government can access, and some of these agencies can access, watershed departments and Ministry of Agriculture can access and provide. So we are leveraging with the government, and they provide them back with the information. So for example, this is, I am ending. So this is another farm model for scenario assessment in looking at how do I manage if I have a corn, if I have a sorghum, if I have a red gram, and so on and so forth, or sugarcane, a series of farmers having different crops around, and we provide each of them to say what kind of groundwater conditions one would evolve and what is a good groundwater condition they have with irrigation, and provide them with the crop choices for the next 5-10 years based on expected rainfall conditions from the rainfall irrigation, and what kind of crop failures are likely, or percentage reliability and success of the crop choices. So looking at multi-evaluation criteria, we look at what's the crop demand, what's the groundwater economics, water use efficiency, which are the main parameters in these scenarios we look at, and provide them the information to NGOs, large NGOs. So in short, to conclude, what is the main message I want to send is that the socio-agro hydro systems are highly dynamic. We're looking at living labs in or there. We have something called water, food, energy, and health. So like Tim said, so we're looking at nutrition part. We know that there is a lot of, so we have teams of doctors working with us, looking at what kind of a nutrition in our food is involved. So the living lab is looking at all of these. And then we are looking at, we see the major message is the feedbacks are very critical in agriculture practices, because the farmers are very shifting to different crops depending on the availability of water. So I can choose a bunch of crops for that soil. So what crop I need to use is important. So this is important for the government, because I need to make available seeds. The seed company should know what he wants in the locally. So seed choice becomes important. Then the livelihoods, there is a strong dependence on the livelihood, so that if farmers want to have 2 crops a year or 3 crops a year, they should be able to be sustained. Then they stay back in the farmland, produce livelihood. Else, there will be a lot of migration to cities. So there is a need for the water becomes the key for managing their aspirations. So there are also interests to look at natural farming. There are investments by several states looking at natural farming, no-till farming. These are gaining interest. So there is an opportunity here to see how do we combine this, considering that many places groundwater is depleting. There is agroecological transitions are happening. There are discussions happening. Andhra Pradesh has invested into a lot of natural farming. So there are a lot of challenges also due to this high growth of agriculture. So there is a lot of interest on demand side management rather than the supply side management. There is a huge interest on reducing the carbon footprint of the agriculture, which means that there is a lot of technology of interest which we need to grab from all over the world to see how we can reduce the carbon footprint and so on. We know that the irrigation can have higher carbon outfluxes if we don't properly irrigate. So there is the opportunity of tactical irrigation for reducing the carbon. So I think there is a lot of innovation still possible as we innovated from surface water to groundwater, and we created a lot of challenges. The challenges should produce more opportunities and innovation. That's why I said a laboratory of innovation in India. And there is a lot of initiatives, a lot of IITs, and I come from Indian Institute of Science, which is #1 premier institute in Bangalore, in India. And so we are all working as a consortium to help the agro-hydrology, agro-water businesses. So there will be a lot of hydraulics, irrigation techniques, food systems. There will be the political economy of it would be very important, as I see. Thank you so much for this patient listening. The background tells you where we work in, analyze the systems, so you can see various farms, small farms. Thank you. Thank you.
So we have almost 17, 18 minutes, plenty of time for questions.
Yeah, that's good. I'll sit there.
Bring the mic and
I have a question for the Piñate family. And I'll go slowly so you can translate. Okay. First of all, don't be embarrassed about not having good English. My Spanish is even worse, so it's all right. Don't worry. The question is around the mechanization that you're doing, because access to small-scale mechanization is a problem all over the world. How are you addressing the engineering piece and fabrication piece of that locally?
Bueno, la fabricación del implemento con el que empezamos fue idea de mi papá.
So really, a lot of this is going to go back to their dad, Edwin, who's here. Edwin is not an engineer by training, but definitely an engineer.
Después de capacitarnos en agricultura de conservación, teniendo pocos recursos, empleamos este rodocamador con el carro.
So after seeing different examples, both through trainings and then through videos and things that people had shared, Edwin began to, in his home shop, fabricate his own equipment. As they got other equipment, found more conventional equipment for tillage, they would adapt and modify it. And I know that Paul was very involved in supporting and going back and forth with Edwin on kind of ideas.
A lot of it is contacting people in the U.S. and most recently in Nebraska. Dwayne Beck from South Dakota has been really helpful. So it's just getting on the phone, literally getting on the phone, video call. Hey, we have this problem. What can we do? And Edwin and now Carlos are just, they've been really innovative. They're the pioneers. They're the only ones doing it in the country. And so they've been making it work. What we've learned is it's worth importing the good equipment if we can afford it. So the whole cost model for them is providing this as a service and having there's an issue of labor supply in El Salvador, and so the mechanization is solving that problem of lack of labor, and so the demand for their services is greater than what they can supply right now. So if they can make the business model work, it should continue to grow.
Good. I appreciated all the panels, the discussions. I came in a little bit late. My name is Michael Davidson. I'm actually here representing a company called Chukow Tech, which manufactures nanobubbles, which I really would like to talk to you about as the missing link for soil health. But my real question here, I'm also climate smart agricultural consultant, worked in India, all over the global south, and a very dear colleague and friend of Marlene Falkenmark, of blessed memory. And she and I would have this discussion about green and blue water every year in Stockholm. And I just want to, I don't know, ask a question, but just bring to the panel's awareness that irrigation is not just a matter of quantity of water, not quality of water, but timing of water. And no matter how much rain we can have 1,000, 1,200 millimeters of rain, and if it comes 2 weeks after we're supposed to germinate, it's useless to us. So it doesn't really replace irrigation. I know people talk about supplemental irrigation. Maybe we'll bring out some pipes to just use it for germination and then pray for rain. I can tell you that in sub-Saharan Africa, where we have put in irrigation systems with a lot of rainfall, we've been able to increase yields by 250, 300%. It's not a problem. People relying on rain, especially when they invest in hybrid seeds that are very expensive and we don't get the rain on time, it's a huge loss. And when we irrigate, we also apply all of our fertilizers through the water, and we don't get a chance to do that when we rely on rain-fed, and there's a lot of other features of irrigation. Real quickly, I don't want to dominate here, but regarding India, the metrics that you showed for the reward program, I actually developed when I was working for the World Bank. One of the things that I didn't see on there was a minimum, what we call distribution uniformity. We did the first survey and inventory of the groundwater basins, I want to say 25 years ago. And one of the conclusions we reached, I think you're doing a better job now, because I think half of the groundwater basins we determined were in the red level and could never be drawn from. But two things. Number one, we said if you're going to do irrigation, and I think about 25% of smallholders in India irrigate today, reaching a minimum DU, we call it, of 80%, which is, without going into too much of the technical data, is just a way of measuring uniformity, the best way we think of measuring uniformity in the field. And the distribution uniformity in India today, I was there about 6 months ago, overall we estimated about 50%. So there's a lot of work to be done besides picking out the right crop. There's a lot of work to be done on irrigation efficiency. And it's not a one-to-one curve. When we increase efficiency by 10%, we're reducing water need by about 75%. It's you divide instead of multiply when you talk about irrigation efficiency. So there's a lot of work to be done, but again, I think that we need to concentrate on irrigation, and when we do it, there's no shortcuts, and you have to do it right. You only got one shot at this. Thank
you. I can say that what you say is perfectly right. I mean, that's where the interest is, that there are a lot of SMEs are able to connect very nicely with the farmers at the lower end, and the farmers are directly talking to them, the small companies, small holders, and they are able to provide technology input saying that when to irrigate, when to schedule irrigation on their app. And maybe there are still numbers are off. Maybe my soil moisture could be 5–6% error, but with more satellites coming in, more data coming into these. So this is where the government is looking at, saying that healthy data will help the tech people to use well, and then the apps will go better, and so on and so forth. On a groundwater, I think there's a big initiative to map. I don't know whether you're familiar with the Bhujal programs and others. So every 1 square kilometer, we have at least 10 wells to be mapped in the southern India, where you get the groundwater level information and so on and so forth. Of course, the technology of able to measure these groundwater levels in a much better way would be a good way of doing things. I agree with you that there is still a long way to go. That's why I said it's challenges. It's a laboratory of challenges.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. I just was wondering about extension. Me gustaría hacer una pregunta, ¿por qué, por ejemplo, hay limitaciones de trabajar con universidades u otros centros localmente para el tema de acceso a tecnología? Si quieres explicar un poco cómo es esa relación con instituciones cercanas ahí en el proyecto que están haciendo.
The question was on the lack of extension services from universities or government extension services.
En Ameyali trabajamos con diferentes universidades en el área de pasantías y voluntariados, le llamamos, para aprender un poco más de lo que es la agricultura regenerativa.
So TSA in our context is working with universities in El Salvador, but actually providing training to the universities through the form of internships and working with some of the classes. In our context, we don't really have universities that have strong extension programs. So really, the universities that we're working with, we're their first, or working with TSA is kind of their first experience working with no-till regenerative agriculture, in practical terms at least.
Yeah, I mean, what we have been saying is, in the absence of having like a real robust extension system with the government or the universities, what we need to do is be creative at creating multi-actor extension networks. And so how can we work with NGOs like ourselves, their company is now also a foundation providing technical services. How do we partner with the universities, the Ministry of Agriculture, and other programs, and just kind of always avoid working in your silos and try and find the commonality and approaches and principles among these different actors to create that extension network.
Just to tag on to that, we've had this, I just came from Kenya, arrived last night. Our primary partners on the ground is a national women's agricultural group led by a former extension officer, but the extension is non-existent now. It's not funded by the government. This is a group that I think could be a model. I would love to connect you guys with them. They're called WOFAC. They work with women, smallholder farmers, but also men and, of course, and people with disabilities to do just that, providing those trainings at the community level across the entire country. I would love to connect you, and maybe there's an opportunity for learning back and forth.
I would just
Absolutely,
add, the YouTube and WhatsApp, the messaging service, amazing on what we can do with that of just taking videos or finding the right videos on YouTube and then circulating them. So all of our farmers and all of our promoters are connected through WhatsApp, and that's how information is shared. So we kind of have farmer field schools that are online.
Presentations. Yeah, now it's coming. Yeah, thank you very much for your presentations and going from the field and practice to the more academic perspective from India. So on this last presentation, I mean, it's fantastic, but on how we can monitor and calculate every little piece of the hydrology in the ag system, I mean, that's a dream for me as a researcher. When it comes to the soil moisture, could you just say a little bit more about how you're going to validate what the satellites are telling us? Because satellites are very efficient in certain things, but they are very maybe not so efficient on telling us other parts of the water balance, and especially soil moisture, because we cannot really tell what's underneath the surface. And could you tell me how are you validating with ground observations into your satellite data, whatever parameter it might be, and how you're thinking who's going to pay for that cost? Because monitoring has a cost. Even though it's what we use for our management, somebody got to carry that cost of collecting data and doing the analysis. Thank you.
Very, very important question. I think the two steps. One is, as you rightly said, the soil moisture is a highly variable, and you can't have satellites measuring all the time, and they're coming at every 3-4 days, and so on and so forth. And so one of the things is that we're looking at two aspects. One is the state, the nation as such has invested in a series of satellites. So the first step is that, including NASA with India and Indian-owned satellites like RISAT. And so we have C-band and new bands, L-band satellites, which are generating data. And at a national level, we are producing data products by the Indian Space Research Organization to be used. The farmer is not directly going to use. Someone in the middle player is going to collect the data and provide the information. So we have generating this. Now, the onus lies on generating the calibration validation for this data. So you have a bunch of academic institutions and research institutions have been tasked with the job of providing pilot studies to be able to ensure that these data products are validated for India's scale. The same thing for evapotranspiration too, by using a bunch of towers, Bowen towers, eddy towers. And then, so you have a global product for India, which is freely accessible to anyone. So there is, if you are interested, you have a site in Indian Space Research Organization called MOSDAQ site. You can download the data for India at that site. So this is one way of improving. Now, of course, at a smaller scale, we still don't have information at the lower end. So what the state agencies are doing is they're putting a lot of thermal soil temperature sensors, which are cheaper. So rather than the soil moisture sensors, they see that the soil temperature is a good proxy for soil moisture. So I see a lot of soil temperature sensors, which are thermometers kind of things, which can be accessed at 50 centimeters and which will be used to be able to say what is my, if I have this much soil temperature, my surface soil moisture. So you can leverage on producing a reasonable, less than 5% accurate soil moisture. It's a dream still for academic institutions, but the outside is going very fast than academic institutions because there are probably large number of AgTech SMEs in Bangalore. You have so many of them, open shops, maybe the small, medium enterprises. So these are small companies connected to Valley, looking at various technologies, looking at simple models. You see, we have some of our students doing crop water budgeting models here, and there are a lot of numerical tools. So they are able to produce some nice apps with that information.
Hello, back to El Salvador. You guys said that the mechanization is allowing more access or better adoption of conservation agriculture. Did I hear that correctly?
Yo buscamos un incentivo para el agricultor en cuanto a la implementación de la agricultura por bajo mano de obra.
The major incentive, and it's not all over, because we're working in areas that we can't actually do mechanization as well in some of the sloped lands. But in the area where they're working, one of the incentives for adopting or switching, going to the mechanized services is the lack of labor. Because the conservation ag is more labor intensive. Well, manual agriculture is more labor intensive. Was there mechanism prior to this? Conventional tillage? And no, the majority of the farmers that we're working with were producing it was all manual production. Yeah. So this which made cost of production way higher than market. Correct. Yeah. So I think if we saw, there was one slide. Yeah. It's gonna take a while to get that.
Never mind.
Yeah. So I think that the cost per bushel was like $26 or something, but the market price in El Salvador hovers around 18. Farmers will recover some of those costs in their second in the same cycle with dry edible beans. So farmers will break even or there's loss, but they don't count it as loss because a lot of it's personal labor, so they're not accounting for their own labor cost. But what we're seeing with the implementation of mechanized conservation agriculture is those costs are going down. It's more efficient, it's quicker, and yields are going up, so we're getting into profitability. So it's helping so I'd say it's like seeing that as helping to adopt regenerative agriculture as a service. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's taking subsistence farming into making it into a business. Exactly. It was, and the majority of the farmers that we're working with are subsistence farmers. So one of the focus of the program is how do we get those farmers? We've developed like thresholds that we're hoping to get to. How do we get these farmers above, to the point where they're food secure, and then above to the point where they can sell excess to improve livelihoods? You want to add anything to that? Oh, and where was the original conservation ag training in 2005? Who offered that to the family? And these guys were, what, 2 or 3 years old?
Yeah. Edwin, ¿quién dio la primera formación de agricultura de conservación en 2005? ¿Dónde ustedes? Pero ¿dónde aprendieron? ¿Quién dio la idea?
Surgió por la necesidad que ya teníamos y de la experiencia que también fuimos a ver.
So his answer is just out of necessity, dryness, clay, very clayey soils, and they needed to do something. So a lot of just learning from other people, and they themselves trying that out. They were working with the Food and Agriculture Organization and other projects over the years. So a lot of it was on piecemeal. And then, so part of the program is really bringing in these set of practices and make the solution. I just want to make a final comment. So on that, from subsistence to viable and profitable farming. And so that goes to your question. Does rain-fed farming make sense? It still makes sense. So what we were looking at is that that farmer was producing 50 bushels per acre before the program, rain-fed. After doing soil restoration practices, he's producing 128 bushels per acre, and he's lowered his cost of production. So now we have a farmer who's producing well, profiting from his farming system. So then if you, at that point, want to add in supplementary irrigation, that's perfect. But I would never recommend somebody who's producing 50 bushels per acre to put in irrigation, because he can't afford it, and he's going to go into debt. So I think you complement that smart rain-fed agriculture with the supplementary irrigation, and you make it profitable and viable.
And with that, that brings us to the end of our session. So thank you all for attending, and let's thank our speakers again for their presentations.